Hi, everybody. Again, thank you for being here. We'll get started in just a minute. On behalf of the Office of Child Care's National Center on Early Childhood Quality Assurance, we welcome you to the Business of Family Child Care, Legal and Insurance Issues with Tom Copeland. Um, Before we get started, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Sarah Kowiak, who has some technology tips for you. Sarah.
Thank you, Patty. Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Kowiak, and I am also with the National Center on Early Childhood Quality Assurance. And if we could go to the next slide, please. We should have instructions for the interpretation feature. And so in this webinar, we do have interpretation enabled. And if you are hearing me now, you may have not selected your preferred language. And we have English and then also Spanish this evening. At the bottom of your Zoom panel, you should see a globe that says interpretation. And if you click that, you can then select your language for this evening, either English or Spanish. And then you might also want to mute original audio if that is distracting in the background if you are on the Spanish channel. And we are joined this evening by our two amazing interpreters, Juanita and Anna. And I will pass it back to Patty.
Thank you. And again, my name's Patty Ryan. I'm with the National Center on Early Childhood Quality Assurance. And just on behalf of the center and all of us, thank you for being here. And really, thank you doesn't seem like enough today or every day for all you do, for the time you devote and the energy you devote to children. And then you come to a webinar from depending upon where you are, 8 to 9:30 in the evening. So again, we're just so grateful for all that you do for our youngest citizens. And our speaker today needs very little introduction. He is truly the nation's leading expert on the business of family child care and a true friend of all of ours. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Tom. Tom?
Thank you very much, Patty. Welcome, everybody. I'm coming to you from my home office in St. Paul, Minnesota. Glad you could join us. This is a webinar that will be recorded and will be made available in the next week or so. So if you are having trouble taking notes, don't worry about it. It's going to be recorded and you'll get access to a copy of these PowerPoint slides as well. We're going to cover legal and insurance issues. Maybe not your favorite topic, maybe not the most exciting thing that you've ever listened to, but it's important. It's important to help protect your business. As I'm going along, if you have questions, post them in chat. And there will be several occasions where I will pause to take those questions and try to answer them. I'm an attorney. I've been working on the business side of family childcare for decades, trying to help family childcare providers be more successful as a business. I do that through webinars like this, through books, as well as answering questions. If you have questions after listening to this, feel free to contact me by email. Here is my email address, tomcopeland@live.com. I don't charge anything for answering questions. Your question might be answered on my website, tomcopelandblog.com, where I posted hundreds of articles on all aspects of the business side of family childcare, including many articles on legal and insurance matters. I'm also on Facebook. Every time I post an article on my website, it will appear on my Facebook page, and you can ask me questions on Facebook. I get a lot of questions on Facebook. We're going to cover a variety of topics, all designed to help you reduce, manage the risks of running your business. So I'll talk about a self-protection checklist. We'll go through a variety of the most important types of insurance that you should have. We'll discuss some legal issues relating to custody disputes and privacy. I'm not representing you as a lawyer, as an individual. If you need professional assistance, you should seek someone out. I've written a book, Family Childcare, Legal and Insurance Guide, and you can get more information about it by going onto my website. First, I'd like to talk about a few issues related to COVID. Can you refuse to care for a child because of COVID? And the answer is yes, you can deny care if the child is old enough to be vaccinated, but is not vaccinated. So you can set your own rule that says, if your child can be vaccinated, your child must be vaccinated, or your child cannot come to my program. The law is not clear about whether you can deny care to a child because the parents are not vaccinated. That's not clear yet. But you can set rules about parents or children quarantine. If a family tells you they've been abroad recently, they've gone to Mexico, they've just been to a big basketball game, a football game, a soccer game, they've been to a big wedding, a big funeral, they've been around a lot of people. Or the parent tells you that someone in their family has tested positive for COVID. You can set your own rule and say to the parent, you cannot bring your child then to my program until 7 days or 10 days or whatever number of days you want have passed. You are free to set these kind of rules to protect your children, the children in your care, and your family. Some providers have been concerned that if a child contracts COVID in their program, the parent might try to sue them. And to reduce that possibility, some providers have created what's called a liability waiver. The idea is that if a parent signs such a liability waiver and the child is injured, does contract COVID, and the parent tries to sue you, you would show to the judge this waiver that the parent signed, indicating that they can't sue you, and presumably that would protect you. The liability waiver could be very simple, and it might say, parent promises to hold harmless the child care program if their child contracts COVID-19 while enrolled in our program. Now, I don't particularly like such liability waivers. I don't think they're going to protect you. That's because I believe that most judges will throw out any liability waiver and it will not protect you. Judges in general don't want parents to be in a situation where they have given up their right to sue you if their child is injured. If we think about before the COVID 2 years ago, children would get sick. They get the flu, they get chickenpox, and so on. If a child got the flu, the parent can't sue you. And COVID is as a virus. And I just don't think these liability waivers will help you. What can you do to protect yourself? Follow the Centers for Disease Control guidelines. Follow your state health department guidelines. That's what will protect you. Parents can't find you negligent if you followed the government guidelines. Parents would have an extremely difficult time proving that their child got sick while in your program. So following those guidelines is what you need to do and not worry about anything else. Let's pause here to see if there are any questions.
Well, one question came in, Tom, when you were talking about the vaccinations and enrollment. And Monica wondered if that is just about COVID or all the time.
You mean about other illnesses?
And the vaccination. It was
Oh.
when you were talking about the vaccination requirement.
You mean other kinds of vaccinations or just the COVID vaccination?
You were talking about the COVID vaccine, and she wondered if it broadly also was true for other vaccines.
The answer is a little tricky. In general, the federal law says that parents must vaccinate their children for a variety of illnesses at certain ages. Federal law says that. Federal law also says, and state laws also say, there can be exceptions for parents who don't want their children or to be vaccinated for religious reasons, for health reasons, for non-religious, what's the word I'm using, for other reasons that they don't feel comfortable with it. States vary in their rules that would allow parents to opt out. But providers can refuse to provide care if the child is not vaccinated for whooping cough or whatever. Parents may not have to vaccinate their child under state law because they have some exemptions, but that doesn't mean providers have to accept those children. Now, if you're in the situation where a parent is arguing with you about this, I would urge you to talk to your licensor to find out if there are some state rules that I'm not aware of that you might have to follow, but follow the lead of what your licensor says. But in general, you don't have to care for children who are not vaccinated. Okay. All right, so let's move on.
Thanks, Tom.
Let's talk about some general issues of managing risks. When you start caring for young children in your home, it's clear that you're taking on additional risks. I once talked to an insurance agent and asked, what kind of claims has your company paid out in a family childcare situation? And here is a short list. In one case, a cat scratched a child and the insurance company paid out $5,000 to the parent. So children could get injured. Your property could get damaged. In Minnesota, there was a tornado that destroyed a provider's house and everything in it. And she only got $2,000 for all the contents in her home. Furniture, appliances, clothing, everything. She only got $2,000 because she did not have proper homeowners insurance. You face potential lawsuits. In Connecticut, there was a SIDS death in a family child care home. And the judge awarded the parent $800,000. Why? You're all mandated reporters. And this judge said, you have a higher duty of care to keep children safe. And in this situation, the provider saw the child on her back and did nothing. And as a result, this provider was found negligent. Car accidents. In Minnesota, again, a provider got into a van with 4 children in her care. The van caught fire and 2 of the children died. This provider has tens of thousands of dollars of claims hanging over her head because she did not have proper car insurance. So this is all the bad news. Terrible things can happen. You need to protect children, your property, avoid lawsuits, and be careful about getting into a car. So that's what we're going to talk about. These are real risks. You can't eliminate them, but you can reduce the risks. You can manage them so that the risks are low enough that you're going to be able to sleep at night and not worry about these things. For smaller risks, we'll talk about common sense policies. For larger risks, we'll talk about insurance. Self-protection checklist. Most providers already do a pretty good job of following these common sense things. It starts with maintaining a safe home. In other words, following your state's licensing or regulation rules to keep children safe. If you're in compliance with the health and safety measures that you're required to follow, and there is an accident, the risk to you is lower. Parents are less likely to sue you, less likely to sue you for less, because you followed all of the rules. One provider said to me, she was out in the backyard during a licensing visit. The licensor was standing right next to her, and the child fell down and broke her arm. The licensor said, I saw the whole thing. There was nothing you could have done. So she was not going to get into trouble from licensing. And I don't know what happened with the parent, but clearly the provider was not at fault. You want to follow all your own policies. Maybe you're required to have some policies by your state, but most likely you have created your own policies. Whatever policies you have, you should make sure you're following them. That means, I think, at least once a year, you should review your policies to see that you're following them. If you're not, you should start following them or get rid of them. Having a policy that you don't follow is worse than just not having a policy at all. Screening parents before enrollment. Believe it or not, I got a call from a provider who said to me, I had a parent interview last night. The parent was late for the interview. I asked her, why were you late? And she said, the parent told me that she was meeting with her lawyer. She was suing her previous caregiver. And the provider wanted to know, Tom, do I have to accept this parent? The answer is no. No. You want to ask parents a lot of questions. You want to make sure it's a good fit for your program. If it doesn't feel right, if the parent is saying things, the child is doing things that you are not comfortable with, don't hesitate to deny care. Now, you can't discriminate based on race, sex, religion, ethnic background, national origin, disability, and in some states, sexual orientation and other characteristics. So make sure you're not discriminating based on that, but you can then discriminate based on anything else. You want to communicate clearly with parents once they're enrolled in your program. Checking in on a regular basis. Do you have any concerns? Would you like me to do something differently? Are you happy with the care I'm providing? You want to be in touch with any parent concerns early on before it becomes more serious. You want to communicate clearly with your licensor. Licensors who hear from you first about potential conflicts or current conflicts with parents are much less likely to investigate you as closely if they hear a complaint from a parent first and they know nothing about it. So tell your licensor about problems. This parent is arguing with me all the time. This parent is left owing me money. I am about to terminate the parent. The parent has threatened me, whatever. Keep talking to your licensor. Screening and monitoring employees. You are responsible for anything your employee does. So you're in one room with some children, your employee's in another room with children, and something happens, a child falls down, is injured, something happens, you're responsible. Even though you weren't in the room, you weren't with the kids, because your employee is responsible to you, and you face any consequences of what your employee does. Therefore, you want to follow all the rules. You want to obviously keep up with paying federal and state withholding taxes, payroll taxes. The big issue here is getting workers' compensation insurance. Each state has slightly different rules about when an employer needs to purchase workers' compensation insurance. It could be on day one. Anybody who's working for you, helping you care for children, is very likely to be your employee, and very likely you will need workers' compensation insurance. This insurance protects you from a lawsuit from an employee who gets injured while working for you. It helps pay for their medical bills if they get injured. Without this insurance, if an employee falls down and breaks their arm, you're going to have to pay their entire medical bill, which could easily be thousands of dollars. And there are severe penalties for not having this insurance. Obviously, you want to be careful when hiring someone, doing background checks, doing proper training, particularly around health and safety issues. And you want to be regularly monitoring them, doing evaluations, because remember, whatever they do, you're responsible for. Child abuse. I only want to say a few words about this. You're all mandated reporters and must report when you see evidence of child neglect or child abuse. The point I want to stress is you need to understand the scope of your responsibilities. And if you're in doubt you should report it. Here's an example. I once got a call from a provider who said to me, the mother of the child has just called me to say that the father is going to pick up the child. However, the father doesn't have a driver's license because he has a DWI on his record. And the provider wondered, is that something I should report to child protection? The father doesn't have a driver's license. And I had never had that question before. So I called up child protection myself because I wanted to know. And I asked them, is this a situation that should be mandated as a reported to you? And they answered yes. If you have seen situations in the past or are thinking of situations in the future that you wonder, is this something I should report or shouldn't? I urge you to go ahead and call up child protection. You don't have to give your name. Just say, I've heard about this kind of situation. Would I have to report it? Because you want to find out ahead of time rather than making a mistake and not reporting it later. Let me pause here again.
Yeah, Tom, there are several questions that have come in, and I want to share with folks. If we don't get a chance to ask your question, as Tom said, his information is available, and he also collects the questions that come in, and we can make an FAQ available to you. Several questions came in, Tom, about family child care educators who are considering enrolling a child with special needs. They think that their program might not be a good fit for children with special needs, and or they're having some behavior issues with some children, and wondered, as you were talking about discrimination, if you have any words of advice for them in that regard.
Yes. All of you are required to follow the rules regarding the Americans with Disabilities Act, which simply says you cannot discriminate against children or parents who have a disability. That doesn't mean you have to care for every child who has a special need, a disability. It does say that you have to take reasonable steps, make reasonable accommodations to care for the child. You have to do what's reasonable. And if the only way you could care for the child would create a significant difficulty or a significant expense, you don't have to do it. So, a couple examples. A child shows up for care and the child's in a wheelchair, and you have 3, 4, 5 steps up your front door. Can you turn the parent down and say, I can't accommodate your child? No. You have to find out what it would take to accommodate the child before making the decision. So, can you lift the child out of the wheelchair and then lift the wheelchair up? If you can, you have to do it. Is there a side entrance the child can get in? If so, you have to do it. If it would cost $200 to put in a temporary wooden ramp, that's not a significant expense, and you'd have to do it. But if it would take a $3,000 cement ramp to solve the problem, that's too expensive in a family child care setting. You would not have to do that. Let's say the parent says that my child has epilepsy. and you are scared to death because you're thinking, wow, epilepsy, this child's going to fall down and have a seizure, and that would scare me to death. I don't know what to do. Can you then say to the parent, you can't bring your child here? No. You would have to find out what would it take to accommodate the child. If you read up about epilepsy, contacted the Epilepsy Foundation, talked to the parent, talked to the child's doctor, what do you need to do if a child has a seizure? And I don't know a lot about epilepsy, but I would say there's some pretty simple, straightforward steps that you could take that would accommodate this child. So your fear that you're not capable is not enough reason to deny care. Last example, the child has a learning disability. Maybe it's a minor learning disability that if you took a class or two or talked to the doctor, the parents, you could handle it. Maybe it's a more severe learning disability. The child has a form of autism. And let's say you don't know how to deal with this child. You would need to find out. You would need to say, I need to talk to the doctor. Maybe there's somebody else in the community. I need to know, what does this child need to get appropriate care in my program, knowing that there are other children here? For a severe case of a learning disability, autism, it may well be that the only way to appropriately accommodate the child would be to have another adult, another teacher with you. Well, can you afford to have another teacher there? Yeah. Are there volunteers that could come in and be there with the child? This child needs one-on-one attention, so you can't possibly do it alone. If there are volunteers that can come in and help, you have to care for the child. If there aren't volunteers, you need to find out how much it would cost to provide care for this child. And depending on what the cost is, it would probably quickly rise to the level of you saying to the parent, this providing appropriate care would be a significant expense to me, and therefore I can't provide the care. I would suggest you contact your local child care resource and referral agency for additional help in getting you connected with people who could give you more specific advice about your situation.
Tom, that's so helpful. Thank you. And there are a number of questions that are coming in that are about specific families and family child care educators. So again, I'm sure there's information on your blog, and reach out to your child care resource and referral or other family child care educator serving organization, and they can support you. I did want to get there were several questions about insurance policies, so I'll just name them and then you can address them one by one. Somebody wondered if insurance covers a trip to the park if something would happen, or if it's only in the home. Somebody wondered if you have suggestions for insurance companies. And there was another question about folks who are renters and what kind of insurance is recommended if they're renting their space that they're providing care in.
Okay, I will cover that. And I see a couple of questions I'll just pick up right here. One question about having a therapist come in to be with a child. Would you have to accept the child? Assuming that having the therapist there means that the child is getting appropriate care at that time, then yes, you would have to accept the child. question. I thought you had to be licensed in special education to work with children with special needs. No, no. Now, there may be certain rules, maybe your licensor has something to say about this, but under the Americans with Disabilities Act, you do not have to have any special credentials to care for children with disabilities. Certain disabilities, there may be some special requirements, but not as a general rule. All right, so let us.
And then there were just a couple other questions about workers' comp and under which situations you needed workers' comp.
Yeah.
And also if somebody wears all the hats, if they're also required to have workman's comp.
If you're a self-employed family child care provider, you're not required at all to have workers' compensation for yourself. Your health insurance should be what covers you. Each state, as I said, has different triggers when workers' compensation insurance is required. I do know that in New York State, having volunteers come over, having friends come over, having your mother come over to be with the kids, volunteers, you're required under state law to have workers' compensation insurance for them. Because workers' comp is such a big deal, it can have such a significant consequence to you. If you don't have it, you should make sure you contact your state workers' compensation insurance office and explain, this is your situation. You have part-time employees, you have students coming over in the summer, you have full-time employees working 3 days a week, whatever, and ask and find out when you're required to have this kind of insurance. Okay, let us move on. First kind of insurance I want to talk about is homeowners insurance. A typical homeowners insurance policy will cover your house for repairing it or replacing it if it's destroyed. It also covers the property in your home, the contents, everything in your home, furniture, clothing, your personal stuff, as well as your business stuff, everything you brought into the home. And lastly, it covers some limited personal liability protection. You have a neighbor come over for a party and he falls off your deck and breaks his arm. Your homeowner's insurance is what protects you in that situation. However, your protection could well change once you started caring for children in your home, because some policies will restrict or even deny coverage if you're a family child care provider. A few policies will not cover your house. In other words, if your house burns down, the policy wouldn't cover you. And we had that situation in Minnesota where a provider had hail damage on her roof, obviously not caused by the business. The contractors were fixing the roof when they saw a sign in her window that said daycare. They told the insurance agent, who contacted the provider and said, we're not going to fix your roof. And by the way, you made a claim last year, we want our money back because the policy that you have with us does not cover any business. So some policies will say no business covered, or no family child care provider covered, or family child care provider covered only up to, say, 4 children. So if you have 5 children and your house burns down, you would get nothing. Those kind of restrictions are somewhat rare, but they do exist. More common is a restriction about coverage for the contents of your home. In most policies, the business property is only covered up to $2,000. And each company will decide what is meant by business property. In the case of that tornado in Minnesota, that insurance company said, any property that's ever used in a business is only covered up to $2,000. The coverage is not based on what I think it should be. It's not based on what you think it should be. It's what the insurance company says. Years ago, my wife quit her job and wanted to become a technical writer and work out of our home. So we turned one of the bedrooms into an office. We bought a desk, a computer, a printer, file cabinets. And I called up our homeowner's insurance agent and said, Pete, are we covered for these new things we just bought? And he said, you're covered up to $2,000 worth, but no more. Lastly, your homeowner's insurance will not cover you if a child or a parent gets injured on your property. The most common injury suffered by children in childcare is them falling down. So a child falls down, falls off your deck, breaks their arm, your homeowner's insurance will not cover you. So I'm telling you that it's quite possible that unless you've got reinsurance from your insurance agent, your existing homeowner's policy may not fully cover you anymore. There are hundreds of homeowners insurance policies out there, and they can change. If you think about the past year or two and all of the natural disasters, the fires on the West Coast, the floods and tornadoes in the Midwest, the storms, the snowstorms, and so on in the East. Insurance companies, homeowners insurance companies, have paid out millions, billions of dollars in claims. And they may decide that they no longer want to insure family childcare providers because they might think that the risks are too high. How do you know if they've stopped providing coverage for you? You may not know. It is likely to be included in all that paperwork that you get when your policy is renewed. Your homeowner's insurance agent may not know that your policy has changed. So what are you going to do? You need to contact your homeowner's insurance agent and tell them, I'm a family childcare provider. I care for 2, 4, 8, 12 children. Is my house covered? Is the contents of my home covered? And if your agent says yes, you say, great, put it in writing. Send me a letter that says I'm fully covered with my policy. If you don't get it in writing, you should assume you're not covered. I have talked to a number of providers who have heard me say this, then talk to their agent who said, yes, you're covered. But when asked to put it in writing, the insurance agent came back and said, I just talked to the insurance company and they said, you're not covered. Some insurance companies will say, To cover your business property, you need what's called business property insurance. The cost of that is relatively inexpensive, probably less than $100 a year. Not a big deal. If you are a renter, you want to contact your renter's insurance agent for the same reason, to make sure that your furniture and appliances, your stuff, all the stuff you use in your business, is still covered. Next type of insurance, business liability insurance. This is what protects you against lawsuits by parents. In my opinion, you shouldn't be in business unless you have this type of insurance. As I've described, the risks are real. The biggest risk is a parent lawsuit. Telling parents you don't have insurance will not prevent them from suing you. What should an insurance policy cover? There are many different types of liability insurance policies that provide a variety of different coverages. They're not all the same. You do not want to shop around for the cheapest insurance, because the cheapest insurance will give you the least amount of coverage. You'll get what you pay for. So here are some highlights. You want what's called professional liability insurance, which includes a failure to supervise. You fall asleep on the couch. A child walks out into the street and is hit by a car. That was failure of you to supervise the child, and you want coverage for that. Professional liability coverage is more than what's called general liability coverage. You want legal defense in excess of policy limits. Well, what does that mean? If your policy covers you for $600,000 and a parent sues you, the insurance company will hire a lawyer to defend you. The lawyer and the parent's lawyer argue it out, and in the end, let's say, the insurance is going to pay the parent $500,000, whatever. But the lawyer is going to bill the insurance company for, could be easily tens of thousands of dollars. You want the insurance company to pay the lawyer. You don't want the lawyer fees to come out of your coverage to reduce the amount of coverage you have. That's what that's called. Child abuse. You want to make sure your policy covers you if there are accusations for child neglect or abuse against your family members, your spouse, your own children, other adults living with you. Accidental medical. A child breaks their arm. The parent takes them to the emergency room. The bill for the emergency room is $4,000. If you have accidental medical coverage, the insurance company will say, tell the parent to give us the bill and we'll pay the $4,000 right away. That's a good thing because it's less likely that the parent will try to sue you for something more. If you don't have accidental medical, the insurance company will say, well, we're not going to pay that $4,000 bill until we know that the parent's insurance won't pay. So we're going to wait to see, tell the parent to go try to get payment from their insurance. And if their insurance doesn't cover, then we will. Well, the problem with that is it may take a while. between the two insurance companies as to who will pay. And meantime, the parent may be very unhappy and may decide to sue. Accidents away from home. This was asked about earlier. Not all policies will cover you if you're in the park with the children and the child falls down. Some homeowners insurance companies will have what's called a rider, a liability rider that will offer some liability protection. But those riders in general have limited coverage and often will not cover you for accidents away from your home. I've written an article on my website called 10 Questions to Ask Before Purchasing Business Liability Insurance. And I go through the 10 most important questions in a checklist, and you can compare the answers from your policy with the answers that I give you, that what you want in the checklist. How much liability insurance should you get? The simple answer is as much as you can afford. Even a little bit of insurance is a lot better than nothing. Each policy will have two different coverages, a per occurrence amount of coverage and an aggregate amount of coverage. What does that mean? Per occurrence means how much will the policy pay for each incident? A child is injured in March, a child is injured in June. That's two different incidents. And in this example, you'd have $1 million of coverage for each incident. Aggregate means what's the total amount of money that the policy will pay out in the course of a year. You can get different levels of coverage. Usually it'll start at 300,000, 600,000, $1 million, 2 million. Ideally, you want $1 million per occurrence and 2 million aggregate. Sometimes you can get 3 million aggregate. When you renew your policy or you're getting a new policy, look at the difference in cost between the cheapest amount of coverage and the largest amount of coverage, most expensive. The difference in cost is probably very small. In one case, I contacted an insurance company, and the difference between their lowest coverage of aggregate of 300,000 versus 2 million, the difference in cost was about $87 a year. So this is not, in my opinion, the place to try to save money. Last type of insurance, vehicle insurance. Getting into a car with children is a potential major financial risk. Multiple injuries, property damage, lawsuits. You want to tell your insurance agent how you're using your car. I'm using my car to transport children every day, once a week, once a month, once a year. Never. I go to the bank once a week. I go to trainings twice a year. I go to the grocery store twice a week, and so on. You want to be very clear about how you're using your car. The insurance company will say, your insurance agent will say, if we think you're only using your car occasionally for your business, your policy that you have now is fine. You don't need anything different. If they think that you're using your car regularly for your business, then they're going to tell you you need either commercial insurance or they're going to tell you, we don't offer this kind of insurance. We're going to cancel you. It's not what you think it means, whether you're using your car regularly or not. It's not what I think it is. It's what your insurance company thinks it is. So you need to be honest, because you don't want to find yourself in a situation where you have a car accident and now the insurance company says, well, we now think you used your car regularly for business, so we're not covering you. Like homeowners insurance, you need to call your car insurance agent and say, okay, I've told you how I'm using my car. Am I covered? Does my existing policy cover me in all of these situations I've described? If he says yes, you say, put it in writing. It needs to be in writing. Some providers don't want to pay the extra cost of commercial insurance because they've been transporting their children. And when they told the insurance agent, what if I stopped transporting children? Would that make a difference? And in some cases it does. And therefore, I have heard from providers who have stopped transporting children because they don't want to pay the extra cost associated with the insurance. You could hire a van, a bus to take children on outings. In my opinion, you should never get into a car with children unless you know and have in writing that you're covered in that situation. You never want to charge parents for transporting children. $20 to take your children to the park or the museum, or $5, no, because then you would positively need commercial car insurance and a commercial driver's license. Just include any fees you want to charge as part of the normal regular rate. If you ask parents to transport children to the park in their vehicles, their insurance will cover. And you want to make sure you're getting permission from parents to do this. If you have an employee transport children, you want to get what's called hired and non-owned liability coverage to protect you if a parent sues you if there's an accident. Nobody likes to buy insurance. Nobody gets excited about insurance. So all of the excuses for not buying insurance don't hold up. If you think you don't have any money, so why worry about parents suing you? That's not a good idea. Because like the provider in Minnesota who had the fire in her van, the claims hang over you for years. If you try to sell your house, they can take part of that sale. If you take another job, they could garnish your wages. You would probably be required to sell your boat. Each state has different rules, but just because you don't have any money now doesn't mean you're off the hook. I have an insurance directory on my website, which lists alphabetically all the companies, and you'll see which state they offer coverage in and what kinds of coverage they offer. If you don't have any luck using my directory, Google independent insurance agent in your town. And that's a person who doesn't work for any one insurance company. And they will shop around and look for a policy for you. Or talk to other people to see if they can recommend an insurance agent in your area. When working with an insurance agent, you want to be totally honest and open. The more you can tell them about your situation, the better position they're going to be in to help you if somebody is making a claim. So report all accidents, tell them about any changes in your situation, particularly if you're changing your hours that you're caring for children, you start caring for children overnight or occasionally on weekends, tell your insurance agent. They can make a simple change to your policy to make sure you're still covered. How can you deduct insurance? For homeowners or renters insurance, you can deduct what's called your time space percentage of that cost. For business property and business liability insurance, you can deduct 100% of the cost. For car insurance, you could only deduct it if we're using what's called the actual expenses method for claiming vehicle expenses. If you're using the standard mileage method, you cannot claim car insurance. So let me pause here. Questions about insurance?
Tom, there were a number of questions about where to find homeowners insurance, but you answered those, and Sarah did put the link to your blog in the chat in case people need it again. There were also a couple questions about waivers, and if you have waivers, if parents can sue, or how that impacts insurance. So can you just share that again?
Liability waivers are not going to protect you. Just no. Judges are not going to allow parents. Judges are not going to allow you to shield parents when their child has been seriously ill. It's just not good public policy. I do not think you should rely on it at all. Liability insurance. Why? Child is seriously ill. That's what we're trying to, seriously injured. That's what we're trying to protect against. The parent sues you. You don't have insurance. Now what? You have to hire a lawyer to defend yourself because the parent's going to take you to court. So, all right, you show up in court. You better have your lawyer with you, and you got to pay your lawyer. It's the insurance that pays the lawyer. So you don't have to worry about any of that. It's stressful enough without a lawyer, with a lawyer. So don't rely on liability waivers. Just not going to work.
Thanks. And somebody asked about pets. Can you talk about pets?
I like pets. Pets are not deductible, if that's the question, if they're a dog or a cat. You don't want pet insurance, if that's the question, because that's a waste of money.
Tom, I think that is all of the questions relative to insurance that have come in.
Fine.
Yeah.
Well, I'll move on and then we'll pick up all other questions later. So now I want to talk about a few legal issues, starting with custody. Biological parents have equal rights to their child until a court takes them away. So if the mother calls you up and says, don't let the father pick up her child, no, you cannot agree to that. The father is the father. The mother says, we're getting divorced. We're talking with our lawyers. So don't let him pick up the child. No. Until I see a copy of the court order, your father gets to pick up the child. The mother enrolls the child and you say, where's the father? And she says, well, he's not in the picture. We live separately, or just I'm the one who's going to always pick up and drop off the child. So I'm not going to put the father on the authorized pickup list. He's not authorized. He's not going to be picking up the child. That doesn't matter that he's not on your authorized pickup list. If he's the father, he gets to pick up the child. Legal custody has to do with who has the power to make decisions about the child's health and welfare. Is the child going to have an operation? Both parents who have legal custody make that decision together. If only one parent has legal custody, that parent gets to make the decision about whether the child's going to have the operation. Legal custody also means who has the right to determine who's going to be the child care provider. So if the mother has sole legal custody, it doesn't matter if the father's unhappy that you're caring for the child. That's the mother's responsibility. Physical custody. Who lives with the child? Who is providing their support, food, clothing, shelter? Including who has a right to pick up or drop off the child. Now, one parent might have sole legal custody or sole physical custody. There might be joint custody where it's shared. So, if a single parent, a divorced parent, is coming to your program and wants to enroll her child, you need to ask who has legal and physical custody. If the mother says, I do, then you say, great, give me a copy of the court order. Because mother, until I get the copy of the court order, the father can take the child. If the parents were never married, I should have said never married rather than unmarried. The law varies from state to state about who has rights. In Minnesota, a couple who was never married, the mother has all of the rights. So if the mother says, we were never married, I have all the rights, you want to say, show me something that says that. Let's say they have shared custody. The father gets to pick up the child on Tuesdays and Fridays, but he shows up on Wednesday. What do? You ask him to leave. This is not your day. If he says, well, the mother said it was okay for me to pick up, then you would say, well, I haven't heard from the mother. Let me call the mother, have a seat. I need to find out what's going on. And if the father says, I'm in a hurry, I'm taking the child, you would call 911. Call the police. Man shows up to pick up the child. You've never seen this man before. He says he's the father. The child runs to him and says, Daddy, Daddy. What do? You don't know who he is. Maybe he's the father, but he can't prove it. So you say, let me call the mother. Whatever the mother says, you're going to follow her instructions. If he tries to leave, you're going to call 911. Privacy. Parents have a high expectation of privacy for their child and their family. They don't want you to release any information unless you're required to by law or they give you specific permission. Having a privacy policy that says that is the professional thing to do. It's a good business practice. It can reduce the risk of a parent lawsuit. What are some privacy situations? Are you posting pictures of children on your refrigerator, on the wall, in a scrapbook, in a photo album that friends or neighbors could see if they come to your house? That's a privacy issue. You should not do that unless you have written permission from the parents to display the pictures. A school counselor calls you up and says, we're doing an assessment of a child who's in your program. We have a few questions we'd like to ask you. You would say, I'm not going to answer any questions unless I have written permission from the parent to talk to you. You overhear some private information from a family member. You're not to share that information. A child is bitten in your program, and the parent comes to you and says, "Who bit my child?" You would say, "That's confidential. Here's how I'm dealing with it. I'm handling it, but I'm not going to share that information." Parents comes to you and wants the addresses of the other parents so that she can send them a notice about her church bazaar. No, that's confidential. You can put a flyer in the cubbies. I can tell parents you'd like that information and they can approach you, but I'm not going to share that. Facebook. I see many provider Facebook pages, and there's lots of pictures of children. And I wonder whether the provider has gotten written permission. One provider came to me and said, "I just took a picture of 3 children in my care. One of the child's back was to the camera. You couldn't see her face. I got written permission from the other 2 parents. The next day, the parent of the child whose back was to the camera came to me and said, I did not give you permission to put a picture of my child on your Facebook page. I'm upset." And the provider said to the parent, "Well, you can't tell who that child is." And the mother said, "Yes, I can. I know that that's my child." So you want to bend over backwards when dealing with photographs. If you're going to have an event, a party, a gathering where parents are coming over as a group, either you want to say, "Parents, you cannot take pictures," or you want to say, "Parents, we're having a party. You can expect other parents to be taking pictures. I need your permission, written permission that that's okay." If you have employees or volunteers working with you, I would confiscate their cell phones so that they don't have a phone when they're with children. Price fixing. It's illegal for competitors to discuss rates. It's called antitrust law. So if you call up another provider who knows who you are, and you ask that other person, "Are you going to raise your rates this year?" Or, "What are your rates?" That's illegal. Your competitors, if you're close enough to each other that a parent could choose either one of you. So if you're on Facebook and you're in California and you're talking to somebody who's in Nevada, well, who's in Missouri, they're not a competitor. So you can talk about rates as much as you want. If the other person doesn't know that you're a competitor, it's okay to discuss rates. So you call up another provider who doesn't know who you are, and you say, "I'm a parent looking for childcare. What do you charge?" That's okay. You can collect information from childcare resource and referral agencies by going on providers' websites, Facebook pages. If information is shared publicly, that's okay. You can share your rates publicly. That's okay. But you can't, if you're in a room, a training class, and there's a discussion about rates, you need to get up and walk out. That's what I wanted to cover. Here is my email address again, my website, my Facebook page. So I assume we have a bunch more questions. This is the time.
Yes, there are. Couple questions about retirement, not yours, but theirs. One is, how many years after you retire can a parent sue you? And the second one is, how long do family child care educators need to keep proof of their liability insurance coverage after they retire?
So state laws will vary. In general, children or parents of children can sue up to age 18 or 21. So you want to keep any accident reports, you want to keep liability policies until after you retire and the last child in your program either turns 18 or 21, depending on your state. Now, I didn't indicate this as one of the factors in choosing an insurance policy. You want what's called an occurrence policy. Most are, but make sure it's called an occurrence policy. This means that your policy will cover you as long as the accident happened when you had coverage with that company. Even though you change policies 2 years later, you've been out of business for 5 years, you had insurance at the time of that accident, and therefore you're still covered. Therefore, you want to save a copy of your insurance policies. I would just save them all. And the second question was, I forget.
Well, actually, you answered them both. How long they can sue you and how long you should keep your insurance.
Great.
And there were a number of questions when you were talking about authorization to pick up children, about if there is joint custody and the enrolling parent does not put the other parent on the enrollment forms. How should you handle that?
If you know who the father is and you don't have any court order that says the father can't pick up, he gets to pick up even though he's not on the authorized list. This may be contrary to what your licensor is saying. Your licensor might say, you can only give the child to somebody who's on the authorized list. But legally, you have to give the child to the father unless his rights have been taken away by the court.
And do you want to reiterate your advice about asking for some kind of documentation?
From the court, you need to follow whatever the court order says. If it's not clear to you, you're not a lawyer. So the parent gives you some court document, divorce decree, something, and you're looking at it and it's not clear to you. What do? You could always call the police. If the father says, I have a right to pick up the child, and the mother says, no, you don't, and you're not sure, you could simply call the police. It's not an unusual request, and say, police, I don't know who has the rights here, and they'll take care of it.
Thanks so much, Tom. And somebody wondered about caring for children in the foster care system. They have the documentation that the foster parent is the guardian. Is there anything else that they need? Especially, okay.
No, being a guardian is a court-ordered process. So that's a legal document that you would follow. He's the guardian. That guardian has legal rights to the child. So I saw a question about how does a father prove he's a father? In general, he can't. A driver's license wouldn't do it. I don't know what proof he could show that he's the father if you don't know who he is. So you would say in that situation, I don't know who you are. I just can't allow you to take the child without calling the police.
Thanks, Tom. And Liz asked if it's appropriate to ask an employee or helper to sign a non-disclosure agreement for both the the children's and the family's information and the provider's own info in
Yeah,
case.
I would call it a privacy policy rather than non-disclosure. But we're talking about the same thing. So yes, having a privacy policy for employees that says you are not to share any information about the child, the parents, their family without my permission. You know, you want to be the one giving out permission because you don't want the employee and the parent having conversations about what's public or not, because again, it can come back to you. And saying if you violate this policy, that can be subject to your termination. And this would include not being friends with parents on Facebook. No. And this employee, this means anything you put on social media, if you reveal any information about the families in my program, that's grounds for you being fired.
Thanks. And in terms of back to the insurance, is an occurrence policy a rider?
No. An occurrence policy, your policy is either an occurrence policy, which I mentioned, or it's called a claims made policy, which would say we're only going to cover you if you have insurance at the time of the lawsuit, and you don't want that. So you just look for the language that says occurrence, and that can be in a rider, but it's not a separate rider.
And Melissa asked if you have an umbrella policy that says business liability. Will that cover what your homeowners won't?
Maybe. And the idea of an umbrella policy is you have your home, cars under, and you get an umbrella policy that raises the coverage limits of the home policy and the car policy. And it's a good thing to have. Because it's pretty cheap and it's significant increase in coverage. You need to be careful. Some umbrella policies will only increase the coverage of the personal homeowners, personal car, and won't provide you any additional coverage for incidents arising out of your business. It still may be worthwhile to do, but it's not helping your business anymore. Some policies do say this will increase the coverage of your business coverage for a vehicle and the business use of your home. It's not liability insurance, it's property insurance. So it's not liability.
Thank you. And moving a little bit to when you were talking about price fixing, if providers use the regional market rate when deciding their tuition, is that considered price fixing?
No, a regional market rate, I assume that's a public information. Any information you get from non-competitors is allowed. So you could call up your child care resource and referral agency and say, tell me everything you can about rates in my area, because they are not a competitor. So any published rates that you see, these regional, I'm not familiar with these regional rate surveys, but I assume it's similar to, you know, average rates for childcare. That's public and that's okay. You want to find out that information.
Thank you. And one last question. How long should they keep tax information and other receipts?
You want to keep your tax records for at least 3 years after you file your taxes. If you have employees, you need to keep the payroll records for 4 years. Some states require you to keep your state tax return for 4 years. I would say, to be on the safe side, save everything for at least 4 years.
Thank you. Before we close tonight, I wondered if you all don't mind and you are so inclined, some of you caught that Tom will be retiring, and as he retires, family child care certainly will be a very different place without him. We've all turned to him for guidance, for his expertise, for his knowledge and his wisdom. And he has really worked tirelessly on behalf of family child care. So if you could please, and you're so inclined, just type a little thank you to Tom in the chat. We do have one more Wednesday Night Live with Tom, but I did learn that Mark Twain is one of his favorite authors, and I found a couple quotes that, Tom, I want to share with you because I think they embody who you are and just your generous spirit. And one is, great people are those who make others feel that they too can be great. And I think that you've spent, and we're grateful, you've spent your entire career empowering family child care educators. And the second quote is, it is higher and nobler to be kind. And I have never known you to be less than kind, and again, generous with your advice, and with just all that you know and that you share. So thank you to you, Tom. Thank you to Juanita and Anna, Sarah and Tatiana. Thank you. And Tatiana is going to put an evaluation up. If you could please answer the evaluation questions for us. And again, we'll make sure Tom gets any of the comments that are in the chat. We're going to make the PowerPoint and the recording available to you, and we hope to see you in 2 weeks. So Tom, thank you, and everyone have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, Patty. The last webinar I'm doing is on retirement, so I will be taking my own advice.
And how appropriate, right?
Yep. Thanks again, everyone. I appreciate your kind notes here. You work very hard, and you have lots of other things you could have been doing besides listening to me. So I appreciate that. And I appreciate all the work that you do. Keep it up. Thank you very much. And goodbye.
Thank you.
For those of you who are still working on the evaluation, we'll give you a couple more minutes to fill that out. And I will put in the chat box a link for the registration for the upcoming webinar with Tom Copeland on May 4th.
Thank you, Tatiana.